On this edition of ITG, our guy Beanie Bishop has a big day on Sunday Night Football, and the Mountaineers drop a disappointing one at home to Kansas State. We'll get into all of that and more on this edition of In the Gun.
You are now watching Believe.
ITG.
With Wes, Owen, and Jed.
I've got the best teammates in the business here, all right?
No way!
They both played the game. They both know the game. Owen is the runaway beer truck known for having some fun.
Owen Schmidt, you have a podcast, In the Gun.
Owen Schmidt, like a runaway beer truck down the sidelines.
Jed is the signal caller who is the X's and O's and the brainiac.
First of all, Jed's research is pretty impressive.
So we've combined those two skill sets.
Skills I've acquired over a very long career.
You are In the Gun.
Once you enter this family, no getting out.
In the Gun, episode 203 of your new favorite WVU football podcast. I'm Wes Schuler, got the best teammates in the business. We got the signal caller, Jed Drenning. And as always, we are brought to you in part by our friends at BetOnline, the world's most trusted betting platform, your number one source for everything sports betting. Every stat, matchup breakdowns, live odds, and spreads to bet on during the games. It's all at BetOnline. The largest catalog of odds, everything from football, Major League Baseball playoffs. We got the Dodgers and the Yankees coming up. The NHL and the NBA are back. And yes, they even have political props. You can bet on the election. And when the games are over, head to the online casino to get in on games of blackjack, poker, or one of over 150 slot games. It's all at the website today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering, BetOnline. The game starts here. And Jed, where we start today, I think is just with some much-needed pick-me-up, some much-needed good news. There's plenty of downtrodden conversation. There's plenty of doom and gloom. There's plenty of hard questions and answers with the WVU football program right now, and we'll get into some of that and continue throughout the season doing what we do. But how about a breath of fresh air? How about we open and we start about our undrafted king, Beanie Bishop, playing in the nickel for the Pittsburgh Steelers, has had himself, as you would imagine, a rookie season for an undrafted free agent starting at nickel. He's had some really high moments. He's had some times where he's struggled. It's been a little bit of that rookie roller coaster for Beanie, right? But man, Jed, I tell you what, if this is a rookie roller coaster, last night was like the absolute peak of the roller coaster, like right before you drop and things really get fun. Beanie Bishop, not only once, but twice, picks off, intercepts future Hall of Famer, future gold jacket guy, four-time NFL MVP, Aaron Rodgers. Both of them massive. The second one really blew the game open for the Steelers. Beanie, once again, I feel like all this guy does is get tackled inside the 5-yard line. He did it against Pitt and Phil Jurkovec, right? Almost had a pick six there. Same thing last night. Almost had one last night with a big return tackled at the 1-yard line. But the first interception in the first half was at a big moment. The Steelers were down. The Jets had the football. It could have gotten ugly there. I mean, the Steelers are down at 9 at that point. If the Jets score, then it becomes the game starts to get into double digits and maybe even out of hand. Beanie intercepts the football. The Steelers score a few plays later, completely flipped the momentum of that game. Steelers went on to score 31 unanswered points, I think it was. And Beanie ends up being the Sunday Night Football. If you've watched, everyone knows. They grab the heroes of the game post-game for the on-field interviews, right? You get one guy from offense, one guy from defense. Of course, Russell Wilson. That makes a lot of sense. His first game for the Steelers and a solid performance is the one guy. And Beanie Bishop, the other, getting a game ball on Sunday Night Football, Jed. One of these stories in the NFL, Beanie Bishop last night. Just really cool. The joy and everything from it. I've got some more different anecdotes, and I got a story about his family and him from last night that I want to share with you. But before I get into any more here, just I think a much-needed smile on the face of all Mountaineer football fans to see Beanie doing his thing on Sunday Night Football.
Yeah, we sure did need it. And, football is a game of momentum. We talk about it all the time. Pro football is no different than college football and high school football. It's all about momentum. And as you talked about, that was a 15-6 at the time. Jets lead. They had all the momentum. It seemed like Rodgers was really kind of having his way dissecting things. And meanwhile, with Russell Wilson, the Steelers' offense had struggled to the extreme and looked very out of sorts. And at that moment, Beanie Bishop doesn't just pick it off. With one hand, he snatches it. I mean, a heck of an interception, setting the Steelers up to go in, tighten the game up. And next thing you know, it almost felt like that score helped cure the Steelers' offense. And then the second pick, people were comparing it, Wes, to remember the deflection at UCF last year when he caught that ball that bounced in the air, and he running up our sidelines. It did kind of have tones or
Yeah.
shades of that
Yeah.
interception on a deflected pass, and that one was a great throw by Aaron Rodgers, right on the money. But you know what? It almost felt like Beanie's hand might have been in that receiver's face, and he comes down with it, as you talked about. Great return because we've seen him in open field in space as a punt returner, what he can do. He's a dangerous guy in space. Got down inside the one, and you might argue that Devontae Adams made his biggest play of the night by making that tackle on Beanie to drag him down inside the one. But hats off to Beanie Bishop for playing as big a role as anybody on that Steelers roster and helping them overcome that deficit and go on and rout the New York Jets. It turned into an entirely different game in large measure because of the two plays Beanie Bishop, former West Virginia consensus All American Beanie Bishop made. Wes, the case I've always made for Beanie Bishop, this is, I think, what separates him. It's not that he's Pac Man Jones or Deion Sanders from a skill set standpoint. He's faster than you might think. I mean, look at the times that he put up in Indy. Yes, he's sneaky fast. You don't see him coming, but I really think what separates him and what makes him who he is, every corner or every defensive back in his case now playing nickel, walking the earth is going to get beat and get beat a lot.
No doubt.
It's all about how you handle what happens after that. Short term memory, put it behind you. You might beat him 3 plays in a row. He's not a guy that's going to dwell on that. He's going to come out the fourth time, make a play on the football, bat it to the ground, pick it off. Some people are saying, but hey, remember all those interceptions he dropped last year? You know what? I would love to be dropping interceptions right now. I would love to be back to the days of being in position to drop interceptions. I mean, you have to be in position to play the ball before you're dropping interceptions.
Correct.
And that's why Beanie was around the football as much as he was. He made some, he dropped some, but he was, his PBUs, his passes defended. He took that single stat and ran with it and just dominated the rest of the country. He's the first guy, in my estimation, to ever earn not just All American honors, but consensus All American honors, not with the flashy stats, not with the picks, but passes defended. That makes his story all the more remarkable. And the great irony of it is the first time we're talking about him at this length as a pro is on a game when he did make 2 picks.
Yeah.
So he's developing into a complete player, and he was a true get. How long was it after the draft ended? A couple hours before the
Yeah.
Steelers signed him?
Yeah.
That contract, yeah, it took no time at all because, as you've told us, they kind of had their eye on him, maybe even in the late round. So they definitely were hustling to get him under contract as an undrafted free agent right after the draft ended.
Certainly were. And it's certainly been it's funny you say that. Everybody knows I work for the Steelers radio network. One of the shows on our network is called The Drive. It's Dale Lawley and Matt Williamson, two guys from 4 to 6 every single day that do a great foot. Jed, you would love it. They're just football dorks. I mean, it's like a football encyclopedia, those guys. And they had Beanie on last week. And one of the things they asked him was, hey, I'm sure you had to be disappointed not getting drafted. But the one positive of that is when you don't get drafted, you could pick where you want to go. You don't have to be beholden to the team. It's the one positive of not getting drafted is you can sit back with your agent and go, okay, 6 teams want to bring me to training camp. Which one's the best situation for me? And you can kind of sit down and make a decision. And Beanie talked about how the Steelers were aggressive with him, the Steelers were early with him, and how they showed him how they've been. I'm paraphrasing here. It's not an exact quote from Beanie. This was last week, but he basically said they kind of laid out for him how they had taken guys with his skill set before and made it work in their defense. You know, Mike Hilton's the big example of that, but a guy like Arthur Maulette as well too. Smaller skill sets, but guys who can tackle in space, guys who aren't afraid to be physical, guys who have a knack for the football that they want for that kind of nickel role, that slot role in their defense. So Beanie talked about that. So you're absolutely spot on. You know, but I even think, Jed, man, even if you would ask the Steelers and their scouting department and everybody involved, best case scenario, I don't think they'd be thinking that, he'd been starting on day one and a key contributor to a 5-2 team through 7 weeks, and that he'd be intercepting Aaron Rodgers on Sunday Night Football. Not once, but twice. Like, it's crazy to me. First Steelers rookie with multiple interception game since 1992, Jed. 1992. Darren Perry was the last Steelers rookie.
That's remarkable.
With 2 interceptions in a single game. 1992. I was 1 year old. Beanie Bishop would still not be born for another 7 years in 1992 to make us all feel different levels of old there. And just
here's another stat, Wes.
Yeah.
I shared this in the group thread. You saw this. Beanie Bishop is the first undrafted rookie in NFL history to have a multi-interception game against the multi-time former MVP in Aaron Rodgers. And that's never happened before.
That's what I was going to say too. We all know Beanie's a ball of energy. He's an addition to any room he walks into. You know what I mean? Like that's an old Tunchokin thing that he used to always say, Jed. Like in every locker room, you got adders and you got subtractors, and then you got multipliers and you got dividers too. And I remember him breaking this down. Like Beanie is a multiplier. I mean, like every room he lights into, he lights up. He puts a smile on your face. He's one of those guys, never has a bad day type person, always joyful, always energetic, the type of people that you want in a workplace setting. I mean, he's always that kind of guy. So, I mean, he was, as you can imagine, he was geeked to get his first NFL interception, to get 2 of them, but to do it against Aaron Rodgers, to do it on Sunday Night Football. I mean, you couldn't really write a better script in that regard. Pretty cool.
Life's all about opportunity. And you mentioned Mike Hilton. Okay, well, Beanie's true opportunity came with Mike Hilton's suspension. Mike Hilton was kind of penciled in, as I understand it, as the Steelers starting.
You mean Cam Sutton? Cam Sutton.
Or Cam Sutton. I'm sorry. Yep. I'm sorry. Cam Sutton. Thank you. Cam Sutton was kind of penciled in as the Steelers starting nickel. Well, and then it was announced he was going to be suspended for 8 games. So here comes Beanie, who was already having a solid camp and already turning some heads, as you reported in camp. Well, next man up, Beanie now has an opportunity to run with the ones. He starts making some things happen in camp. He starts making some things happen in preseason games. And the next thing you know, they go to Atlanta, and he is the day one starter at nickel. Now, here we are, 7 games into this with another game to go with Cam Sutton's suspension. It's difficult to say no to production. And what you saw out of Beanie last night was production. And if he has another outing like that next week against the Giants, I know Cam Sutton's come back. I know Cam Sutton's pedigree, and I know Cam Sutton's history. But when you make yourself undeniable, and a 2 interception game is a step toward becoming undeniable if you follow that up with more solid performances. And as you said, it's kind of been a checkered first month and a half for Beanie, highs and lows, but there were some highs to build on. So if he builds on those 2 picks that he had, we're saying last night, but this will drop on Tuesday. But on Sunday night, the 2 picks that he had, yes, Cam Sutton's coming back. And yes, that's going to be a difficult animal to fend off for Beanie. But at the same time, you're building a bit of a portfolio that you didn't have 2 months ago. So let's see how this goes.
Yeah, well said. And, make that a difficult decision for them when Cam Sutton is back here after Monday Night Football next week when the Steelers host the Giants. That will be the 8th of his 8th game suspension. But yeah, fantastic stuff for Beanie. I got 2 little quick anecdotes that you guys will love as we wrap up this Beanie conversation. But first, a thank you to everyone at Toothman Ford. Big shout out to JR and to Team Toothman. We all know cars cost less in Grafton. Okay, so again, everyone knows game's over. There's the on-field interviews, right? Beanie's the star of the show, so he gets the on-field interview. with the broadcast with NBC, and then radio wants to talk to him, and then NFL social media wants to shoot stuff with him, right? I mean, and the photographers and all these different things, and he's trying to, you know, say good game and things like that to guys on the Jets. It's a whirlwind. It's a whirlwind for those guys in those moments, but I think particularly when you're Beanie and you're not Russell Wilson, you're not someone who's been in that situation, been the highlighted player of the game on an NFL primetime stage many times before in your career. This is Beanie's first. I mean, make no mistake about it. Beanie played in the Big Ten. Beanie played in the Big 12. He's played high-level football, but not like Sunday night football in prime time, right, against the Jets on NBC.
I used to be in the post game next to Melissa Stark on the
That's
field
right.
with Russell Wilson, right? Yeah.
That's exactly right. So all that chaos, right? Post-game NBC interview, pictures, radio, NFL social media, Steelers social media, all those different things that are trying to get Beanie for their little hit, their little piece of content. Mike Tomlin's waiting for him in the locker room, right? Because, I mean, he's getting a game ball. He's one of the players of the game, and Mike Tomlin doesn't address the team until everybody's in there. Mike Tomlin addresses the team, and then Tomlin goes and does his post-game, and the guys do their post-game and that kind of thing. So Beanie is here. Beanie's there. Beanie's everywhere. He's a million different things. He's like a kid in a candy store. He's smiling. He's laughing. He's taking pictures. He's shooting video, interviews, this and that. Micaiah Cherry, who is one of these Steelers communications, Steelers PR people. Great person, Micaiah. Fantastic at her job. She is like, Beanie's still out on the field doing some last, I think, NFL social media. You know, like he's got like the cell phone and he's like, hey, Beanie Bishop, you know what I mean? Doing the little content pieces. And Micaiah's like standing at the tunnel like, Beanie, come on, come on, come on. Tomlin's waiting for you. Come on, let's go. Let's go. Because Tomlin's waiting. The whole team and Mike Tomlin are waiting for Beanie Bishop to get into the locker room so they can proceed with their speech and their, you know, all these different things, media and all those obligations. So Micaiah's like, Beanie, come on, let's go. You know, like pulling a little kid off the dance floor type thing. And so that was fantastic. So, you know, he goes in and the team's waiting for him and he gets a game ball and all this stuff. And then, you know, Mike Tomlin goes to his press conference. The guys do their locker room media, all those things. Family comes out. So after Steelers games, right? Once the field gets cleared, all the different media, all the different things out of there, you know, it's probably a 15, 20-minute process from the time the game ends. The Steelers in one of the end zones kind of rope off an area where family are allowed to come down and take pictures and wait for the guys. Okay? So it's pretty funny. A lot of times you could see the different family members, the parents, the wives, the whoever, like waiting down there for the guys to come out of the locker room. And I see a whole group of people, like 4 or 5 people, all in Beanie Bishop jerseys, just having a blast, taking pictures, selfies, talking to other people, all this. And I'm like, that's got to be his family. You know, it's got to, I don't know if it was his parents. I don't know, like whatever the case may be, aunts, uncles, siblings, really good, close friends, whatever it was. But Beanie had a group of like 5 or 6 people who were there in his jersey, down on the field, just geeked out of their mind. You know what I mean? And Jed, again, with Beanie being the star of the show, they're waiting and they're waiting and and players are starting to file out of the locker room and they're waiting. And Cam Hayward comes out and they all take a picture with Cam Hayward and they're waiting and they're waiting and the families start to disperse and there's still no Beanie and they're waiting and they're waiting till finally the only people left on the field are like 5 or 6 Beanie's people that were there. And the TV, you know, the late night news people who were still shooting their stand-ups on the other side of the stadium. And finally, Beanie comes out and, you know, big hugs and big smiles and pictures and all that stuff. But it was just hilarious. I mean, he was the belle of the ball, man. He was the star of the show. And, you know, 24 years old, having that type of moment, from, you know, not getting drafted to, yeah, he had a great training camp, but you never know. Nothing's guaranteed making the team, right? I mean, Beanie said he cried when he found out he made the final roster. To have this is kind of a seminal moment in your rookie season. Pretty stinking cool for our guy.
And it's fun that a combination of Beanie and Zach and Doug. Okay, Doug's going to have some moments up there with the Steelers. He's on the taxi squad, Doug Nestor.
Yep.
But right up the road, you know, an hour and 15 minutes north of Morgantown. You're working for the team, so we have a cool special insight And you don't have to be a Steeler fan to appreciate these segments on the podcast. You just have to be a Mountaineer fan. And I think that's what's so cool about it. So anytime one of those guys does something, we can kind of take you on a bit of a unique ride, pull the curtain back a little bit, and you can show them a little bit about what it's all about. And couldn't be happier for Beanie. Yeah, it's in black and gold, and on Sundays I'm a Steeler fan, but doesn't really matter. I'd be pulling for Beanie and Zach and Doug, irrespective of where they
Yep.
were. It's just a lot easier when they're that close to West Virginia doing what they're doing. And yeah, it's a great story. It's a great story. I mean, I thought the timing was perfect, understanding that look, the guy coming off the suspension is about to come off the suspension during the Steelers bye week. So this is the perfect time as the guy who stepped in for the guy who was suspended to
Yeah.
really amp it up and ratchet things up with a performance like that under the brightest of all lights on Sunday Night Football.
Well said. And just an awesome moment, an awesome time for Beanie. And you love to see the just the enthusiasm. It's contagious being around that guy. I was trying to think about it. I probably won't see Beanie till now, like another 2 or 3 weeks when we travel to DC when the Steelers so home on Monday night against the Giants, then bye week, then to DC against the Commanders. So I probably won't see him again until the road trip. Maybe I don't know. I might see him on Monday, but probably not. But I'm excited to give him some props when I see him here next, and ask him if he got Aaron Rodgers to sign those footballs like he was saying he wanted to do. We'll see. That's the some
McAfee can be the
yeah,
middleman there.
some real, like one of the real journalists that covers the Steelers needs to stay on that for me because we need an update on that story as it plays out. But
You want to segue? The
yeah,
reason we're not talking about Zach is he's battling injury. He's on the shelf, which we'll get into some of that when we come back
yes,
after the break to talk
he
about the
is,
K
and
State game,
sounds
what we're going to be facing against Arizona and on down the line.
yeah, and I'm actually glad you mentioned that real quick before we go, because we did talk about Zach's injury last week. Again, sounds like relatively not something that's going to keep him out a long time. I think the bye week falls at the right point for this too. He missed Sunday night against the Jets. He's going to miss Monday night against the Giants. But then it sounds like then bye week. Then it sounds like that week they think he has a chance to be back, that he could be ready to go at that time. So if that's the way it plays out, he'd only end up missing 2 games, which would be fantastic. But sounds like everything's trending in the right direction for Zach. And he's certainly, whether it's the week out of the bye week in DC or, maybe the game after, sounds like he's going to be back much sooner rather than later, which is fantastic for a Steelers
Incredible
offense now
momentum.
for a Steelers
He's
offense
building
now that,
incredible momentum. You don't want that being
no
repeated too
doubt.
much.
No doubt. He's built incredible momentum, and now it feels like the Steelers offense and that run game is building some momentum too, and we certainly want to see Zach be a part of that and put his hand in that pile and get some love in the process. So yeah, big shout out to Beanie Bishop, and let's keep it rolling. Let's keep more. And a big shout out to Geno Smith, Eugene Cyril Smith III. Once again, after a week behind Kirk Cousins, he surpasses Kirk Cousins once again as the NFL leader in passing. So a big shout out to Geno doing his thing out there on the West Coast as well too. He had a monster game as the Seahawks rolled the Falcons in a game that most people picked them to get their butts kicked. They did the butt kicking, and Geno was a big part of that. So a big shout out to him. I've been loving the great start to the season that he has had as well too. So good things.
Dangerous.
Good things from our guys on Sundays. That is for sure. We've got to get to a break. We will talk a little K-State when we return on the other side. Wes Euler, Jed Drenning, you are in the gun.
For nearly 20 years, Fortis has been the nation's leader in providing guaranteed roof performance programs for commercial buildings. Fortis offers roof performance solutions that feature extensive initial and ongoing reconditioning for commercial buildings as an alternative to traditional replacement, with long-term performance guarantees that are backed by global leader Lloyd's of London. Fortis offers a comprehensive range of roof performance management programs that provide financial security, extend the life of our customers' roofs, and make a significant impact on ROI. Fortis is currently improving performance and increasing ROI for customers at more than 4,800 locations, with more than 140 million square feet protected, including many Fortune 500 companies that have turned to Fortis to save money, gain financial certainty, and extend the life of their existing roofs. Fortis has helped customers save more than $520 million in capital roof replacement costs for an average ROI of over 250%. To learn more, visit fortis.us.com. Fortis, roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed.
Nobody supports the blue and gold Mountaineers like Toothman Ford. With over 20 NIL deals and counting, Toothman Ford continues to rally behind our student athletes. And it's time we rally and support the dealer that supports the Mountaineers. Not only does Toothman Ford offer the best prices in the state on pre-owned, their never over MSRP campaign on new Fords guaranteed to save you thousands. Drive with pride all season long, knowing you're supporting the dealer that fuels our Mountaineers. Toothman Ford, where cars cost less, in Grafton and at toothmanford.com.
There are better-known tractors in the world than Coyote. Ones with bigger names, longer histories, more popular hats, cute toy lines. But there's not a single tractor ever been built that's better equipped to do the dirty work. So we'll just focus on what really matters. Coyote, we dig dirt.
Now at Johnston Equipment, get 0% financing for 72 months, plus a free loader on select Coyote models in stock. Visit us on Route 33 between Weston and Buchanan.
Back in the gun here as we roll along. It is time to discuss the loss to Kansas State, back-to-back home losses for the Mountaineers. Saturday night, the Wildcats coming in, and a game that wasn't as lopsided at the beginning, certainly as the final score looked, but another game certainly that I think was a big disappointment and another big opportunity for this WVU football team on homecoming weekend. And can I just say real quick, the first time we've seen this edition of the classic uniforms, the blue, gold, which is my favorite. It's the boomer in me, I guess, even though I'm in my early 30s. I just love the blue, gold. It looked really sharp with those new pants. It looked really sharp with those new jerseys. And I always love it when we wear that combination on homecoming weekend. But Jed, where do you want to begin here? Maybe where we should probably begin is speaking of, we went to break there just a minute ago talking about Zach Frazier and his injuries. Any updates, any light you could shed for us? We know there was kind of a laundry list of guys, Wyatt, Garrett, Jaheim, Jaden Bray out. Arby Burks out. So let's start with some any injury news or updates that you got for us here first.
Yeah, we were hit during the game and before the game on the D line. But real quick comment on the uniforms. Johnny and Tony and I were discussing this on and off the air during the pregame. It's the first time I've seen some other people point this out too. This isn't just mine. It's the first time since the Sugar Bowl year that we have fashioned that look with the old style and the blue stripes down the gold pants. So the first time since '93 that we got to see that, and it looked really sharp. It did. It looked really sharp.
It was awesome. Yeah.
But not sharp enough. I mean, the look only goes so far, right? But no, as far as the injuries go, okay, what played out was we had a couple on the D line. TJ Jackson was already nursing a lower body injury coming in. He was limited, but made some key plays. Mm-hmm. We were trying to kind of package him and put him in third down situations or even second long situations. But Hammond Russell was dinged up during the game. So he's a guy we're going to continue to monitor. And then you had this rash of injuries on the offensive side of the football. You just talked about it. Here's what happened. The injury to Wyatt took place. Now, I'm going to call them upper body injuries. We can't be too awful specific. You have to figure that out on your own. It's kind of code these days for what it means. But Wyatt was lost the series before, I think, the final series of the first half. So Big John Williams went in that final series, that long drive. So Wyatt was already gone. Now, I couldn't get an update at that time. So what ended up happening was I didn't even realize Jaheim was hurt. I didn't realize Garrett had been hurt. And at halftime, I talked to Vince Blankenship, our head trainer, and that's who's my go-to guy for these injury updates. And I said, "Hey, what's going on here with these injuries?" And he said, "Wyatt out." I said, "Out, out." He said, "Out." He said, "Garrett out." Now, bear in mind, Wes, I just left the locker room where I saw Garrett sitting in his locker as the team went out, and he was still in pads. I described this in the post-game show. I don't even know how this happened to him, but he had blood from his neck to his ankles. He was saturated in blood. I don't know what that was from. he gets scraped up quite a bit. His style of play, he gets a lot of turf burns. Every time I turn around, the
Sure.
training staff try to tape
Elbows
something
and
up on him.
things like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but he was bloody as all get out. I mean, I felt like it was one of those moments that if you had taken a black and white image of Garrett sitting in that locker, I think you'd want a Pulitzer just because it represented, oh, wow, like he
Yeah.
stepped out of round 11 of a Rocky Apollo fight. That's what he looked like. He was physically pummeled. Uh, so Ben said, Garrett's out, uh, and Jaheim out. And it kind of just rapid fire. And I was like, whoa. So I immediately came outside, uh, turned my mic on. I was still hot to our engineer, Pat Sargent. And I told Pat, I said, grab Tony. I got to talk to him. And so Tony came on and I walked him through what was going on. And we kind of unfolded it, unpacked it for everybody as the second half started. And I was even talking to, Josh, is it Josh Sims? Good dude, sideline reporter for TV. And part of it he knew, part of it he didn't. But it was okay. Here we go. Let's circle the wagons. Right, we're already up and down with bodies on the D line, and now you got your All American tackle out. You got your spark plug offensively out in Garrett, and your big play guy in Jaheim. Okay, let's pound them with CJ and see what Nico can do. Circle the wagons, guys, and it didn't play out obviously the way you would want it to. Uh, I mean, even we didn't know it at the time, but we'll get into some of these situations, but that 17-10 failed fourth down conversion on the 4th and 2 down at the 3. I mean, even if we tie the game there, those guys are still missing in the second half. So you have quite a challenge in the second
No
half.
doubt.
But we,
Yeah,
you
no
know, we
doubt.
didn't know. Neil didn't even know it at that time. I mean, Neil didn't know about Garrett and Jaheim until we got in the locker room. It kind of was just sprung on all of us. And that's the nature of that type of injury. Sometimes they play out on the field and you don't really know. And we're not even certain. Like I'm watching the tape, Wes, trying to figure out when it happened to Garrett. And I mean, I've narrowed it down to between 3 and 5 spots on that final drive that I think it might have, including the hit on the sidelines that wasn't called as a personal foul. But there were at least 3, maybe as many as 5 different times he could have suffered that injury. I just can't figure it out. I'm not sure if Garrett would know if you asked him. But and then I saw early in the third quarter, uh, kind of dressed like Sith lords in their with their hoods up. I saw Garrett and Wyatt both standing there, and they just obviously weren't in a good place for a host of reasons. They weren't in a good place. I didn't see Jaheim. I didn't spot him right there at the time, but I did spot Garrett and Wyatt a few minutes into the third quarter. But that is not what you wanted to unfold from that standpoint. Now, okay, let's quickly update that. Neil talked about all those guys today. Jaheim, it sounds like we're a little optimistic about his return by midweek. Bear in mind, you know how these things work. There are certain protocols. You get specialists involved, and you have to hit checkpoints and pass certain protocols and get cleared. And we're not so sure at this juncture. Early in the week, again, we're taping Monday. This drops Tuesday, about Garrett or Wyatt. So stay tuned on that. But it might mean you have Johnny Williams making a start at Arizona, and it might mean you have Nico making a start heading back to where he was Gatorade Player
Yeah.
of the Year in the state of
Yeah.
Arizona. So we'll see. I mean, we should. I don't know. I don't know if we will or not. By the time we tape Wednesday night and drop the preview on Thursday, maybe we'll know something. But we'll certainly keep you posted with whatever we do know.
Yeah. Sucks, man. I mean, it you talk about Garrett being, beat up and dejected in the locker room and Pulitzer, if you could have gotten a still image of that. I mean, that shot that you have in your mind is, that's probably it's kind of the picture of the season. You know what I mean? Like just
Never forget that.
hasn't gone
Wes,
the
I'll
way
never
he
for the
thought,
rest of my life forget seeing him sit there.
hasn't
I'll never
gone, and
forget
I'm
it.
sure that was all running through his mind, not only the pummeling he took in the first 30 minutes, but just how, the first 7 games of the season certainly have not gone how he expected, how they expected, how the fan base expected, how anybody expected from a from a personal standpoint for him too, and from a collective team point as well. Um, it sucks, man. It's one thing to be struggling and to be losing games, and particularly at home these 2 weeks in a row. It's another to be losing. You know, listen, I think the collective goal of this season is probably lost at this point, right? But at the same time, if you wanted to have something, if you wanted to build any momentum, if you wanted to have something positive down the stretch to hang your hat on, it's probably going to start with these guys. And, now they're not available either. It's just, it's like a double edged sword. You're not playing well and you're not getting the results, and you're losing bodies in the process. Obviously, we wish those guys full recoveries, man, and hope that they can get back to it as soon as possible.
He is, we'll get into first talking about the offense and some of the things going right, a lot of the things going wrong, but and then we'll talk about the defense. But uh, I mean, after being around Garrett for as long as I have, I can pretty confidently say at this point, and again, that's an image that there are certain images in this job that are going to stick with me forever. Uh, some of them are good, some of them are bad. Like, I'll forever remember Bobby and Ann Bowden. I was standing 10 feet from him on the field at the Gator Bowl in his last game as the head coach at Florida State, as he was watching on the Jumbotron the commemorative video honoring his career, and just the glassy eyed look of him and his wife. And to be able to be feet away and almost feel the energy of that moment. Things like that are really
Sure,
cool.
sure.
I remember being just moved beyond words at Rutgers in 2011 uh, when Eric Legrand led them on the field. I was, again, blessed enough to be right there by the tunnel. Eric Legrand, of course, suffered the injury on the kickoff early in the year, was in a wheelchair, still is, and was leading them in his wheelchair onto the field, and watching Rutgers rally around him. I was feet away from that. I feel very fortunate to have seen that. There were just certain images, walking out of Tiger Stadium on a Saturday night with the captains and watching Noel Devine lean into Mike the Tiger's cage and just start shaking his head, trying to get Mike the Tiger, Mike the mascot riled up. Of course, Mike's so sedated, he's not going to be riled up no matter what. But things like that. But added to that mental snapshot gallery forever will be what I saw looking at Garrett sitting in his locker, in his pads, bloody as a gladiator, as I walked out of that locker room. And I kind of, before I asked Vince, I knew he's done. That kid can't play another down of football tonight. And I can honestly say he is one of the toughest young men I've ever been around. My playing days, my broadcasting days, my coaching days, just a tough, tough guy in every respect. And can't have enough respect for him. But the way this game unfolded, it was so very unfortunate in the sense that offensively, you weren't supposed to be able to run on him, right? Well, we said, we'll see about that. And, to an extent, that was true in the sense that they kind of did the same thing Iowa State did, and that is bridling the combination of Jaheim and CJ. Well, the X factor that is always difficult to corral is Garrett. And Garrett, in some instances, was almost single handedly making some stuff happen in the run game. Those back to back lengthy drives to turn a 17-3 game that was on the verge of collapse in the first half back to what almost was a tie game. But we had, and one of the first things I do, Wes, when you have, I always say this, in a game where the defense scores on a touchdown, I start looking at snap counts. As soon as the other team scores on defense, my eyes immediately go to snap counts. I want to see what kind of advantage we're going to have in running up a much higher snap count than resting our defense and forcing your defense to defend a bunch more snaps. So in that sense, that was the silver lining to be found in an otherwise dark cloud of that pick six. We, going into the half, had forced their defense to defend 44, 45 snaps, and our defense had only been on the field for 20 some snaps. So at that juncture, that was absolutely, you talk about making the most of a bad situation. That's how you do it. You get two long drives going against a defense that's already a little tanked and run that snap count up. Now, in a perfect world, that puts you in position to make some hay. And by the end of the third quarter, early in the fourth quarter, they start that 3 yard game becomes a 5 yard game. Bill Cowher used to be the master of this, right? So at halftime, that's one more thing. Not only were we had a sizable advantage in total yards, but we had a very significant advantage in total snaps, and they had been on the field a ton. So all those things were working in our favor at that juncture. So offensively, those were some of the things on an otherwise what seemed like a disjointed effort with the passing game. Now, part of it, credit to Kansas State, they played above what I had seen them play on tape, and some of their coverage combinations, not quite the less aggressive version of what I've been seeing them play with the three deep zone and things like that. But early on, I don't know what it was, but Garrett was a little out of sync. When you think of that ball that he threw to Jaheim up the Kansas State sidelines, remember that, Wes? You know what that was? That was a version of what we scored on Cincinnati with Jaheim last year. Remember the
Yeah.
75-yard touchdown pass?
Yep.
Where we put Gallagher in motion, ran that seal route. Well, that's Jaheim on that post flag, but this time it was to the left instead of the right, and it was there. But Garrett's lower body mechanics were just out of sorts enough that he can get that throw where he wanted it. Same with that pick to T-Ray. That football, you could argue T-Ray needs to come down with that, but that throw was obviously behind him, which contributed to the poor outcome of the interception. So we had some opportunities that Garrett would normally make the most of throwing the football that for the first handful of snaps, he just didn't. Now he shook that off and made some throws after the fact in the second quarter, but it was a first half of missed opportunities. And despite all that, we drove down in it wasn't a goal to go quite situation. It was a what was it, a 4th and 2. And I completely applaud the notion of going for it on the 4th and 2. Now you can argue the call, the execution, whatever you want, but it felt like, look, 17-13 is not going to cut it in this game. Okay, we're struggling enough when they get humming on these third downs to get some stops, but uh, that's kind of what I saw unfold in the first half, and then we come out in the second half, and the deck's completely reshuffled with the injuries, and they get the quick 3 and out. They snuff things out with Nico. He's knocking the rust off, and by the time we get moving a little bit offensively, what frustrated me was it was 17-10 at the half. So if we could have come up with a defensive stop for Nico. At least you're putting him in the game in a one possession game. But the issue was we didn't. They drove the length of the field. Now they go up 2 scores. It's 24-10. Now you're asking your rusty backup quarterback to step in and face a 14-point deficit. That's not good for anybody. Against a team that's already struggling to run the football, and Jaheim's out, Wyatt's out. So it was a challenging situation. It was less than ideal for Nico. So let's say that first and foremost, and eventually he started making some things happen and got a little bit settled in and a little bit more comfortable. By that time they had started to separate, and it was too little, too late, the way things unfolded. But before we go further with that, what are your thoughts about things that played out or didn't offensively?
Yeah, I completely agree with the decision to go for it there at the end of the first half. Like you said, didn't feel like field goals were going to cut it in that game. We know Kansas State, and they've got a dangerous offense. They've got a potent offense. And I think you knew you needed a touchdown in that situation. They were getting the ball back out of the half to let's try and get on level footing here. You know what? It's funny. Same thing. I mean, I think any chance. Listen, I'm sure nobody was feeling great at halftime, particularly when the news of the injuries and Garrett's out and Wyatt's out and Jaheim's out starts to spread throughout the stadium and the fan base and everything. You're not feeling great at that point, regardless. But like you said, I mean, the one thing you couldn't do was let Kansas State come out of the locker room and have a demoralizing touchdown drive, and they came out of the locker room and they had a demoralizing touchdown drive. From that standpoint, that's a tough way to make a living. I mean, like you said, you put your rusty backup in there, down 2 scores, and you're struggling to run the football, and you're down some of your big horses. That is just so very rarely ever going to end up being anything other than what we saw in the second half. So from the offensive standpoint, I mean, it's tough. It's they're
Yeah.
struggling to do what they do best, and you're adding injuries on top of that. It's a bad recipe.
The turnovers, look, you had to play clean football, and there's nothing clean about two first half turnovers that force you to fall behind. And in one case, give them a touchdown, another case, give them a short field. And there's also nothing efficient about 5 for 17 on third down or 1 for 6 on fourth down. So you're looking at 6 for 23 on what Neil calls into possession downs. That's just a tick over 25%. You're not going to beat anybody doing that, much less a good team like Kansas State. And the turnovers were costly, just as they were against Iowa State later in the game. But, in this situation, we blinked early and felt like we almost overcame it with the turnovers when it turns out we didn't, as they separated in the second half. Whereas against Iowa State, we blinked late, and that felt like that was the difference at that juncture in the game. But that's what the two games had in common. But yeah, it was frustrating. We do need to figure this part out where this whole one dimensional run game relying on Garrett, because first of all, Garrett may not be a go on Saturday, and second of all, that's not a way to make a living long term. That's just not. That's one of the reasons that your quarterback is where he is right now, beat to a pulp. So you're going to have to find a way to get CJ and Jaheim humming, much like they were this time last year. And if you don't do that, uh, it's going to be tough. It's going to be a challenge because nothing else is going to fall into flow where it should offensively if you don't get that going. Now, again, this was against an Iowa State defense that was number 2 in the nation against the run, but there were some cracks between the keys and there were some opportunities. And you just didn't make the absolute most of it, certainly for the balance of 60 minutes, maybe in part due to the injuries, maybe otherwise. But even at the half, you were still trailing by 7 to a very good football team that was going to come out and get the football. It's not where you want to be. So that's kind of what it felt like on offense, Wes.
Tough way to make a living. Thanks to our friends at Fortis for being a presenting sponsor of In the Gun, our buddy Rick Lewis, for roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed. You got to visit fortis.us.com. Other side of the equation as we wrap this thing up, Jed?
Yeah. We talked all week about the absolute need to maybe not stop their ground game, and who dreamed we could to the extent we did for the
Well,
first
I was
30
going to
minutes.
say, yeah,
Yeah.
geez.
But at least mitigate the damage done by it. I mean, DJ Giddens came in number 4 in the country running a football. We knew that they had an athletic quarterback. We knew Dylan Edwards was an athletic number 2. They brought a lot of weapons to bear in the run game. And defensively, we game planned accordingly and kind of dared them to beat us throwing the football. And they did. And this is kind of what Neil talked about in the presser today, not in the sense that you would think. I thought it was a very well crafted game plan on their part. Um, they came in at halftime with the nation's 4th leading rusher, showing a stat sheet that, what do you read, 7 carries for 9 yards at the half, DJ Giddens. We completely slammed the door on DJ Giddens. And yet they were in the lead 17-10, in part because of the pick six, but also in part because of the early relative efficiency of Avery Johnson throwing the football. He really blossomed in the second half. But even in the first half, he showed some flashes of making some things happen. And once again, for the second week in a row, what happened in the second half, we couldn't get him off the field. A week ago, we struggled against Iowa State. They converted 64% on third down. Well, Kansas State wasn't that far off, 58%. Kansas State, here's where I really appreciated their game plan. They didn't ask him to do a whole lot, Avery Johnson, in terms of advanced reads. They didn't say plant your foot and go from the post to the dig to the crosser. It wasn't like that. It was all relatively quick game, decisive, one look reads off one read key. And you can only do that if by and large you're getting some manageable third downs. And here are the way the numbers shook out, Wes. They ended up, if you look on the stat sheet, it says 7 for 12 on third down, but that's a little misleading because one of those was also converted after the defensive holding. So I kind of look at it as like 8 for 13. But when you look at it in the first half, it felt like they were in a lot of manageable situations because they were, but it got worse as the game went on. Their average third down in the first half was 3rd and 7. Now at halftime, I have them as two of 5, converting those. The real problems came in the second half. In the second half, their average yards to go on third down was 5 yards. And so that put them in position to look at the cracks between our zone coverage and hit the soft spots, ask him to plant his foot in the quick game, make one decisive read, and just spin it to a stick route or a hook or a short crosser. It was almost like you could play the game in your living room in the type of route tree that they were running because that's all they needed. They had so many third downs and manageable. Here I charted it out. In the second half, you're looking at a 3rd and 3, 7-yard completion. 3rd and 5, they ran the ball for 0, but then converted on 4th down when they threw it. Again, they were looking at it as a 4-down sequence, obviously, with that call on 3rd down. 3rd and 6, that's when they hit the big angle route to DJ Giddens for 53, but it was a short route. It was a 6, 7-yard route. 3rd and goal, 1-yard touchdown to the tight end. 3rd and 8, 9-yard completion. 3rd and goal at the 7, penalty. 3rd and goal at the 1, they ran it. 3rd and 8, incomplete. But one of the things I did was I was curious because it was such a short, controlled pass game on 3rd down that I wanted to look at it. And a good metric to represent the average depth of how far you're throwing it is, one metric site calls it average depth of target, another one calls it average depth of throw. It's tomato. So I looked at that and Sports Info Solutions. I plugged in 3rd downs only and looked at Avery Johnson against West Virginia. And his average depth of target was 5 yards on 3rd down. That's how far he was throwing it in the air. Now, on every other down, it was 9 yards, which means there were some deeper, some shorter. But
Yeah,
in other words, it absolutely was what it felt like it was: death by 1,000 cuts. Uh, these 3rd down and manageable situations, and he was just gutting the quick, working the quick holes in our zone defense. And good, they came in with that game plan. They knew they couldn't run the football. I mean, I kind of felt, even with DJ getting struggles early on, I thought, all right, that's a bag of nickels they got to keep swinging, because if he doesn't penetrate and he doesn't make some hay, this might be a long night for them. But that's at the same time I thought that they were going to ask Avery Johnson to hit a bunch of deep balls, and that's not what they asked him to do. When you look at the one long touchdown they had, that wasn't a blown coverage. They just beat us. We were in straight quarters coverage. They ran a bit of a double move out of the slot. Our safety bit on the double move just enough. Boom, game, set, match. Nice throw by Avery, 60-yard touchdown. It was straight cover 4. That wasn't a blown coverage like the one against Iowa State. Unfortunately, we were in, what we thought was position. We just overplayed it on the double move. But again, they didn't ask him to do a lot of that. It wasn't a lot of deep stuff. And they didn't have to protect as much. It was, we couldn't have an impact because I think they appreciated our ability to pressure the passer from a front 7 standpoint. And another reason not to put him under too much duress, Avery, and just let him get it out quick. And that's kind of what they did. But that was the frustrating aspect of it. And I'll get your thoughts on that. And I have a couple comments about the run game, but what do you think?
yeah, it's man, it's I mean, it's the same thing that I was just saying a few minutes ago, but it's a tough way to make a living. They they're struggling as a defense, I think, particularly against the pass game. Done well. I mean, bottling up some very talented running backs, but that becomes less important when you get gashed by the big plays like we've done consistently. And Jed, as you and I have continued to discuss I mean, you and I have talked about this since the Penn State game. Just a lack of forcing turnovers, the lack of taking the ball away. When you're giving up big plays and you ain't taking it away, that's a recipe for getting a lot of points scored on you. Even when, I mean, again, they have done, I think we all would have taken heading into the Kansas game. If you would have laid out for these next 4 games, Kansas, Oklahoma State, Iowa State, Kansas State, 4 teams that like to run the football, 4 teams with really good running backs, 4 teams that run the football successfully. If you would have just shown us the numbers, how those 4 games were going to go from a run defense standpoint, we would all said, hell yeah. We would all signed for that in blood. They did a very effective job for 4 straight weeks in that regard. But when you're giving up 60, 70-yard touchdowns too often, and you are way too sparse at taking the football away, unfortunately, it doesn't do the damage. It doesn't have the effect that it should.
And as we'll talk about when we preview Arizona, when you're dead last in the league in 2 critical areas: 3rd down defense, so your inability to get them off the field, which means they'll extend drives. What happens when you extend drives? You breach the red zone because you stay on the field. and we're dead last in touchdown percentage allowed in the red zone. So those are two areas. If you want to directly impact your outcomes, those are the two areas that I would start with.
Yep.
But it kind of felt, Wes, when they were trying to run the football, again, I thought they'd keep swinging that hammer, believing that I didn't know if they had a path offensively without more success than they had for the first three quarters running the football. But I was wrong. That quick, controlled passing game proved to be more of an extension of the run game than I thought they were capable of. So hats off to Avery Johnson, hats off to their staff. I thought it was a great plan. Connor Riley, Matt Wells, they put a good plan together that matched Avery Johnson's skill set, and he was well prepared. Now, again, I mentioned DJ Giddens, nation's fourth leading rusher with 9 yards at halftime. He didn't have much more than that after three quarters. And what I found curious, and this is what struck me as odd about it, I have profound respect for Chris Kleiman and his program. I think they do everything about them is done the right way, right? I have a lot of respect. I think they're a first class unit. It struck me as odd. The game's decided. There's 5, 6 minutes to go. Why is Avery Johnson still in the game handing off to DJ Giddens? And I got this weird feeling that, look, I know some teams that would concern themselves with what I'm thinking, but not a Chris Kleiman team, maybe. And that is, okay, well, the stat line for DJ Giddens was so ugly and so unilateral, it stood out. It will be one of the first things you notice, even with Kansas State blowing out West Virginia. You're going to be like, wow, DJ Giddens had how many yards? Look, if he just gets 3 or 4 solid totes with the game decided and sneaks an 18-yard touchdown or a 17-yard, all of a sudden you might slip into that murky area where not as many people notice. And it'll just seem like kind of serviceable day for DJ Giddens, and maybe we shouldn't focus as much on what West Virginia was doing defensively with their run defense. Because I do think, and it's something that I talked about in the post game, I do think what we were doing, chopping off our front with those slants and those run stunts, it's not the last time Kansas State's going to see that. You're going to see a better equipped defense emulate some of what we were doing against their run game, a defense that's better equipped in the secondary to match that half of it as well.
Sure.
And I could see them having to find a way around some of what we were doing to them. And again, that's the only thing I could come up with is maybe you're thinking that, okay, he has 24 yards or whatever it might have been going into the fourth quarter. And what if we can sneak a cheap 30 or 35 yards for him, get him up to 60? Maybe people will ignore what happened against West Virginia, and they won't realize how dominated he was for 2.5, 3 quarters on the ground, and won't try some of that. I don't know. But it just felt weird that in a 3 or 4 touchdown game, which it was at that point, he still had Avery Johnson and DJ Giddens in the game. And that's so un-Chris Kleiman like. I mean, I'd expect that out of James Franklin for different reasons. I'd expect it out of Pat Narduzzi for different reasons. But Chris Kleiman is not of that ilk. He does all the things the right way. And I'm thinking, okay, there's obviously a reason he did that. Risked injury to, the nation's fourth leading rusher for no reason, it seems, in a decided game. And it just that part of it felt weird to me. That just part of it just kind of felt a little weird.
Yeah. I could tell the football dork and you had to discuss that. You had to get that out. I can sense it.
I had to. It was bothering me. I just I'm thinking, again, I've been on the other side of that. And I know what he means.
No, there's always a rhyme or reason to that, and you're probably right. It's probably because, hey, if we can get him up to 70 yards, all of a sudden it won't be the red flag. What the heck was going on here? When a bunch of scouts and coaches look back at the stat line here,
it's like
this morning, Sunday morning or whatever.
I remember when I was in the booth on the headsets with Rich, and we're calling an offense at Glenville, and we had an All-American receiver averaging 12 catches a game. That broke all Jerry Rice's records, right? Well, okay, it's the second possession of the third quarter, and I realize we're blowing them out. And okay, the starters, we're about to yank the starters. This is it for the starters. And meanwhile, I look at the stat sheet, and my guy has 5 catches for 51. I'm like, you know what? I bet without even Rich knowing, I can kind of angle him into slipping a few quick screens to my guy, and he ends with 7 for 78. Then it looks different on the stat.
Right.
I remember thinking that. You know what I mean? It's not going to hurt anything. He's about to leave. And so that crossed my mind just so nobody pays attention to what they were doing against us defensively.
Dork.
With him in particular. Anyway.
Dork. Well, anyway, I've enjoyed this second portion of the podcast way less than I enjoyed the first portion.
Yeah.
One more thank you. That's
Yeah.
to our friends at Johnston Equipment. 0% financing for 72 months plus a free loader on select Coyote models in stock. You got to visit Johnston Equipment, Route 33 between Weston and Buchanan. Jed, before we go to, wanted to give a couple shout outs. We always plug when I'm doing the tailgates, tell people to stop by, say hello. We did have a handful of people that stopped by and said hello and even said, hey, to my wife, we listened to the podcast. See. So everyone was a good sport. Everybody was funny. Found out we have a couple loyal listeners in the Peach Lot that actually tailgate in the Peach Lot too, which was pretty cool. So, oh man, big shout out to Clay. Big shout out to Morgan. It was her birthday, not my wife Morgan, other Morgan. It was her birthday. Big shout out to John. I know there's a couple names that I'm forgetting as well too, but it was nice to see a couple of listeners. I don't think
Did
there was
Will Gregory make it?
I don't think so. I don't think I saw Will.
He was going to try to.
I don't think so. But a couple of our listeners that I had met previously that swung by to say hello again. Few new faces as well too. So always enjoy that. Appreciate the hellos and the support as always.
The flag looks very immaculate.
Flags look great. And listen, we got two more home games. We'll be there. Sunshine or snow, we'll be there. No matter
snow for UCF. Yeah.
No matter how these things go in Arizona and in Cincinnati. In the meantime, we will be there for Baylor and we will be there for UCF. So still some more opportunities to come say hello and hang out and see the cool WVU Grateful Dead and ITG flags that we have flying there.
Cool that I mentioned to you, and I want to say it before I forget in case I do for the Arizona preview. But got a text today from Tim Agee, former Mountaineer defensive head knocker Tim Agee, who used to really be a headhunter back there, the hitman Tim Agee. But there's going to be a bunch of former Mountaineers meet us at the hotel in Tucson. So that's really cool too. I'm kind of amped up about that. So a place we've never been, at least against that team. We've been there for a bowl game 30 years ago or whatever it was, but it's always kind of cool when you get to play a program for the first time. So we'll get into that on the preview episode, but there's a novelty to it. And some former Mountaineers are going to be there. So let's jump on a plane and get ready. We're flying out of Pittsburgh this time instead of Bridgeport. But we'll see how this goes. We'll see. But we're going to break it all down for you in the preview. But I wanted to give a shout out to Tim Agee and those guys before I forgot.
Yeah, probably much like last year when the Mountaineers played at UCF, right? You got a lot of fans there in Orlando that don't get a chance, and surrounding areas that don't get a chance to have the team come close by. I got to imagine there's a lot of Arizona and just West Coast Mountaineers who have been planning to make this trip for a while. So if that is you, safe travels this week. Hope you enjoy yourself. We will have a full Arizona preview on Thursday. Phil Steele on Friday as well.
Shout out. Not to interrupt. You texted during some point early in the game and you commented on the crowd. And absolutely, what was it? 53 and change,
54 something, I think. Yeah.
Great homecoming environment. Wish we could have delivered. We didn't. But you were absolutely right. What it takes to sour the fan base. That's the mark of a great fan base. Anybody can be up when you're up, but Mountaineer fans are up when you're not.
I was shocked.
I
texted
incredibly impressive.
I texted you guys. 10 minutes before kickoff, that place was 90% full. I was like, "This is." Yep. I did not expect this. So,
great point on your part.
Hey, hey, we control what we can control.
It ain't going well, and
it ain't going.
This just in. This just in. We're not where we want to be. This just in. Anybody has turnout like that when they're where they want to be. Well, maybe not Pitt, but most schools have turnout like that where they're one they want. But it takes. There's only a select handful, much shorter list of fan bases that show up and support like that when you're not where you want to be, which we obviously aren't. So it's moments like that are incredibly impressive. It really is. It's one thing to be at your shining moment when you're unbeaten, But to turn out like that, great text on your part. I'm glad you pointed that out. That was impressive.
You can kill a lot of things. You can't kill the Mountaineer fan base, baby. And can't turn it off. I'll be there 2 more times in November, but we got a couple road trips and a bye week in there as well, too, before we get to any and all of that. But that'll do it for this edition of ITG. Thanks to our guy Skyler for putting this together, as always. For the Beer Truck Big O, the Signal Caller Jed Drenning, I'm Wes Schuler. The one thing we ask of you is to be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast. Take care. We'll talk to you in a couple days. You've been In the Gun.
ITG.
The fun doesn't have to stop here.
Be sure to hit subscribe and never miss an episode.
If you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback,
be sure to follow us on X at In the Gun Podcast.
Join us again next time.
Until then,
tell an ear to tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast.
This mission is over. It's over.